When it comes to subnetting, it can be made really easy when we remember the big 5 questions for IP subnetting, which are important to keep in mind whenever we're doing a subnetting question for the CCNA. So, firstly, how many subnets are being made? So, we've got to think how many bits are turned on in the subnet mask. So, if you look at the subnet mask, can you identify how many bits are turned on? Remember the difference between a class A and a class B and a class C, where you need to draw the line. I'll show you in an example, but you need to draw the line and then how many bits are turned on, and then that is X, and then 2X is the number of subnets that are being created. Number 2 is how many hosts do we have per subnet? How many host IP addresses do we have per subnet? So to work this out, it's a case of we need to count how many unmasked bits there are. So how many bits are turned off? How many bits are 0? When we're looking at how many bits were on, next to those bits are now how many bits are turned off. How many zeros do we have? We count them up, and then multiply that. We calculate 2y, 2 to the power of the number of the bits. So for example, if it's 2 to the power 3, then we'll have 8, but then we take away 2 because we have to reserve 2 IP addresses, one for the network portion, one for the broadcast address. So that's the formula, 2y minus 2. Question number 3 is what is the increment size or the block size, or what is the valid IP address subnet size? That is 256 minus the subnet mask. So for example, if you go on an IP address 255.192.0, 255.192.0, if it's a class B, then you draw the line between 255. You draw the line 192.0 is that 192 we're looking at, or the focusing on. That is the subnet mask. So it's 256 minus 192. That will give us 64. So subnet 64 will be the increment size. So that means every network every block will go up in 64. What's the broadcast address for each subnet? So that's the last IP address in the block, or in the block range, and then the valid hosts are the IPs between the first IP address and the last one, the broadcast one. The first IP address, the network portion. Everything else in between is the valid host until we get to the last IP address, which is reserved for the broadcast address. So that's the big 5 of IP subnetting. Now, when it comes to doing if we were actually to do an example of this and apply this, it's not as difficult as it might initially seem. So if we have an example here where we need to work out the subnet for, if we were going to subnet this example here, 192.168.10.50, which has a subnet mask 255.255.224. It's just a case of going back to the big 5. So really focusing on the big 3. So how many subnets are being made, are being created? So we look at, if we were to convert this to binary, that would be 8 ones dot 8 ones dot 8 ones dot 1 1 1 0 0 0 0 0. 3 ones, 5 zeros. 3 ones, 5 zeros. So we need to look at how many bits are being, how many subnets being. So for how many subnets being created, we need to look at how many bits are turned on here. And this is a class C address. So if it's a class C, It's the last octet that we're focusing on here. So how many bits are turned on? We're just looking at that. We're not looking at the whole subnet mask. We're just looking at this. So if you see how many bits are turned on, we can see it's 3. There's 3 bits turned on. So 2 to the power of 3 is 8. So that's how many subnets. So number of subnets 8 subnets. Now let's work out how many hosts do we have per subnet. Hosts per subnet. So remember the formula, 2y minus 2 was the formula. And y is how many bits are turned off. How many zeros do you have? So if we look back here, you can see, well, those 3 bits turned on, 5 zeros are left in that octet. So that's 5. So 2y, y is 2. Y is 5. So 2 to the power of 5 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32. So we have 32, 32, take away 2 is 30. So we have 30 host IPs per subnet. That's the answer for 2 of the big 5. Of the big 5, that's question 2 answered. Now if we move on, what's the increment size? What's the block size? The block size is 256 minus subnet mask. So let's go. If we look at the mask, is 1110000, which is equal to 24, as 224. Sorry. So 256 minus 224 equals 32. The block size is 32. Now we can figure out, now we've got the block size, now it's very easy for us to figure out what the actual ranges are going to be. So what we want to work out is, what is the first, we want to firstly want to know network address, first usable IP, broadcast IP, and we want to know we also want to know the last type, usable IP. So that's what we're going to try and work out here. So we know we have a block size of 32. So if we start off with the network address, let's go back and see the follow. Look at the IP address. We have 992.168.10.50. We want to work out what was the first IP address, usable IP address. What's the last usable IP address? And we want to also know which subnet does this come in. So 192.168.10.50. Well, network address if we start off 192.168.0.0 is the first IP address in this range. Okay, this IP address will come in this range because 10 comes between 0 and 32. So what we do now is that's the first IP in this range. apologies, sorry, that's the network address of the range. It's the network address of the range. First IP will be 192.168.0.1. It's just one IP address after the network address. The last IP address will be, so now we're going all the way to the end of the subnet. To figure out the last IP, the easiest thing to do is, what is the next network address? What's the next network address? It's going to be 192.168.168.32.0. So we just need to go one IP address back now. So 192.168.31. The last IP address you can have in a block. It's going to be 255. So 192.168.3.1.255. That's the last IP in that range, which that's not the last usable IP address. It's 254. That's the last usable IP address. Remember, this means last usable IP. That's what we're looking for. So 254 is the last usable IP address. The 255 is the broadcast. So that'd be the broadcast IP address. 192.168.31.255. That's the broadcast IP address. We know network address 192.168.0.0. First IP address is 192.168.0.1. Last IP address 192.168.31.254. 192.168.31.255. Just one IP address up. This the literal last IP address is the broadcast IP address. Second last IP address, the last usable IP address in the range. It's the second last IP address in the range is the last usable IP address that we can have for a host. First IP for a host would be .0.1.